Full-scale intelligence quotient, or FSIQ, is the score that summarizes your overall cognitive ability. And today I'm going to be breaking down what FSIQ is, and then I'm going to go through all 5 different methods for improving FSIQ backed by actual research. Now, you can't actually improve your FSIQ, but you can remove limitations on it. And I'll be focusing on BDNF to increase FSIQ, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and is a protein that helps your brain adapt, grow, and get stronger. There's chapters below, so if you already know what FSIQ is and just want the methods, feel free to skip ahead. We'll start with explaining what all the numbers mean, and actually, I brought a special guest, Basilius, to explain FSIQ for all of you.
Full-scale intelligence is a composite score that analyzes a person's overall cognitive ability. There are 6 different subcategories within it, which are grouped into indexes. I'll go through all 6 since you'll need to know what each of them are before we get into improving them later. Increasing your IQ with the following suggestions will make general tasks and life overall noticeably easier, and improve your mood and physical health as well as intelligence. Best of luck.
The first index of FSIQ is VCI, which is the Verbal Comprehension Index. It measures a person's ability to comprehend verbal information, analogies, antonyms, information, and comprehension. So essentially, your verbal knowledge and how well you're able to reason with words, vocabulary, general knowledge, and how well you understand relationships between different concepts. It's the category that can be improved the most, I'd say, just by studying language and reading. The more words and concepts you've experienced or come across, the easier it is to improve all the tests that this category measures. When you start to read and understand more words, you build networks within your own mind, which help improve your intuition. And because on VSCI tests, you won't be able to understand every word you see, you're going to have to rely on that intuition. Next is FRI, which is the Fluid Reasoning Index. So essentially, it's just solving new problems. And usually we can contrast it to crystallized intelligence, which is the opposite. Crystallized intelligence is information that's stored in your own mind and what you've learned and built up over time. But fluid reasoning is completely different. It's how well your mind works in the moment on things that it's never dealt with before. It measures matrix reasoning, figure weights, and figure sets. These tests show you patterns or shapes and expect you to figure out what comes next or what rule actually connects them without ever explaining the rule to you first. So it doesn't have much to do with what you know, and is what you use when you're solving problems that you haven't seen before, those that require pattern recognition and figuring out a rule from different examples. Because none of it depends on things that you've already learned, it's harder to prepare for compared to VCI. You can't really study it for the same way, since studying gives you more to pull from, but FRI is testing how well you can think on the spot with nothing to pull from. The more examples you're given in a test, the more chances you'll have to notice a pattern, but the pattern itself is always new, so past knowledge only helps a little bit, if at all. The third index is VSI, which stands for Visual Space Index. This one's pretty simple, and it measures the ability to analyze visual details. For example, Sherlock Holmes, and when he analyzes the surrounding areas. Let's say a detective, or Sherlock Holmes, walks into a room and sees a single bullet hole in the wall, at a specific height and a specific angle. I'll give you a couple questions as examples that the detective would have to solve for, using VSI. So questions like, if the bullet entered here, at this angle, tilted slightly downward and to the left, where in the room could the shooter have been standing, and how tall would they have to be? Were they sitting, were they standing, or on the stairs? This category encompasses puzzles and spatial awareness. It shows you how well you can mentally manipulate shapes and spaces, being able to rotate them in your head, as well as figuring out how pieces fit together, like the detective example, without moving them. This one is more related to actual spatial practice, and what's interesting is that research shows that video games that value understanding the spaces around you, for example, CSGO, can improve VSI. Next is QRI, which is Quantitative Reasoning, and this one measures quantitative knowledge and arithmetic. It's about how you reason through problems that involve numbers. It's less about speed and more about how well you can think through a number problem, break it down, and figure out what steps actually get you to the answer. We'll get into exercises that can actually train this later, as we have drills to improve this. Formal logic problems and reasoning are also prevalent in this category, since a lot of QRI isn't just plugging in numbers to a formula, it's figuring out what the problem is actually asking and what information matters, and also what steps to take in what order. This makes QRI a mixture of FRI and basic math skill. You do need some foundational math knowledge to work with, similar to how BCI needs your vocabulary to work with, but the real test is whether you can reason through problems with numbers, not whether you memorize a formula ahead of time. So because of this, it's a category that you can improve with practice, but the practice has to train the reasoning aspect, not just the repetition of basic calculations. Now we have WMI, which is Working Memory Index. We went over this one a bit in the last video, but it measures digit letter sequencing, digit span forward and backward. It's mainly about how many items you can hold in your conscious mind or hold in attention at the same time without losing track of them. Forward digit span is simpler since you're holding numbers in order, but digit span backward adds another layer because now you have to hold the numbers and then flip them backwards before even answering, which takes way more conscious effort to manage. For more information about this and conscious aspects, feel free to check out the last video on the conscious versus unconscious modes of intelligence. Like we have for QRI, there are methods and drills to improving this, which we will elaborate on later. Since working memory is more about training capacity and holding your attention rather than learning new facts or rules, the drills are built around stretching how much you can hold in attention. Finally, PSI, Processing Speed Index. And this one measures raw speed and accuracy on simple visual information while also being pressured by time. It's tested through symbol search and coding, which is character pairing. And out of all the 6, this is the one that's least about knowledge, strategy, or anything else that can be remembered. Because there's no rule to figure out, no vocabulary to draw on, and no pattern to solve, the tasks themselves are quite simple, almost even boring. The challenge is doing them fast and correctly at the same time, over and over, without your accuracy actually dropping. It's the hardest to train with a specific drill, but the general principles we cover can help improve this as well, since it's less about learning something new and more about how efficiently your mind and body work together under pressure, so improvement here tends to come slower and more indirectly compared to the other categories.
The issue with what most people try to do is exercises to improve their IQ, but there's very little that can be done in terms of practice and exercise specifics for each. I do want to be honest before going further. Studies on intelligence show that genetics account for a large part of the difference between IQ within people, up to 60%. Although BDNF is what determines whether you're actually living up to the top of your potential or getting limited somewhere below it, is within your control, and we'll be going over those things within your control and elaborating on how to improve them.
There's 5 different methods I'm going to cover, and all 5 work on removing such limitations and limiting factors from your IQ. This goes without saying, but if you only do it for a couple days, you won't see the results you're looking for. So make sure that you stick to these things throughout your entire life, as all these are generally good for improving your quality of life as well. So the first method for increasing IQ is training, specifically aerobic and resistance training. I know, it's simple, but out of everything you can do, training gives you a huge buff on all areas of cognition. Most people get confused on how training or working out improves brain function, but there is a strong positive correlation between the two. A systematic review in molecular biology reports, sourced from multiple databases, found exercise consistently increases BDNF levels in the brain, which drives measurable improvements in cognitive function. A separate review narrowed it down even more and found that the effect is strongest in the hippocampus region specifically, which is the area of your brain responsible for creating and forming new memories. So that's where you get both neurogenesis and synaptogenesis, which means new neurons and new connections between them. Intensity is also extremely important. Walking is good for you generally, even for developing and utilizing the unconscious aspect more, as we covered in the last video, but it's not strenuous enough to matter for FSIQ specifically. You need to get your heart rate up and your muscles under considerable pressure. There's also a compounding effect that's important. The more consistent you are, the more the effect is drawn out. Studies show that training once will only give BDNF a small boost, but over time, the increases in spikes within BDNF grow larger every next session of training. So simply put, the effect gets stronger and stronger, so discipline and consistency is necessary. 4 to 5 sessions a week is good, mostly aerobic training specifically. I put this one first because this method makes everything on the list easier. The second method for increasing IQ is sleeping. Maximizing your sleep is probably one of the most important things that you can do for improving your intelligence, as it's the time where everything you learned in the day gets put into your long-term memory. Research on BDNF signaling shows that memory consolidation requires both sleep and BDNF expression happening at the same time in the hippocampus and the amygdala. So if you remove sleep from your schedule, you're basically just nerfing yourself and wasting your time every time you study. You could spend hours grinding drills for FRI or QRI, but if you're not sleeping right, a good amount of that work is never retained. It's not just about total hours you sleep either, it's about the stages that you're cycling through. So deep sleep is where a lot of the memory consolidation and physical recovery happens, while REM sleep is more tied to processing emotional experiences and connecting ideas together, which is part of why problems sometimes feel clearer after a night of sleep rather than they did the night before. So if you're cutting your sleep short, you're skipping stages when your brain needs to actually lock in what you learned. A full cycle of sleep is 90 minutes, so either 7.5 hours, 9 hours, or at worst, 6 hours. Waking up in the middle of a cycle is what you can sleep 7 hours and still feel bad. But if you sleep 6 hours, you can feel fine, since it's just about waking up at the end of a cycle. The third method is actual direct training on the cognitive tasks themselves. Research and studies have brought in consistent results, but we can take a good example from NBAC drills. When you do NBAC, it makes you better at NBAC, but it also makes you better at drills and exercises similar to NBAC as well. This shows us that the ability gained carries to similar domains that require such skills. Some of that may still transfer to FSIQ, but it's still somewhat of an increase. The issue is that other studies tried to replicate the transfer and came back with mixed results regarding general FSIQ. So although it can improve similar exercises to NBAC, it's not great for improving fluid intelligence. People argue that this becomes useless because there isn't such an improvement in terms of actual FSIQ, but it does help improve WMI to a good capacity, which can be useful in domains you wouldn't normally consider. Another exercise you can do is syllogismus, which is a good training tool for building fluid reasoning skills. It works on FRI and QRI, although it doesn't have much research compared to NBAC. So you can do it at your own discretion. I wouldn't argue that it's the greatest method, but there are things that you can benefit off of it, especially improving your fluid reasoning. Another very important thing to consider is your environment. The more variables you add to your daily routine or variants you add to your life, your brain has to account for those things and use conscious ability to analyze and focus on it. Your brain will naturally adapt to things around you, including your routine. So that's why having a routine and imbuing focus into that routine is important, so you can move more energy and be more creative regarding the tasks that you are doing, rather than constantly trying to figure out something to do, when to do it, and other factors of that nature. Once the basic tasks like eating, training, sleeping, and working are all on autopilot, you can reserve conscious energy for more useful tasks and tasks that are more important, even putting it more into your work, which can help you achieve more or any other project you're trying to take on. Typically just performing better in general. Friends are also extremely important because whatever you surround yourself with will eventually flow into your unconscious. What this means is that if you constantly put trash into your mind, your brain will gravitate more towards those things naturally. Now, I'm not saying to cut everyone off. It's important, extremely important, to be sociable and have a group with the mentality you wish to have. Studies have shown that having higher social engagement actually leads to higher cognitive scores over time. Not even to mention social intelligence factors or emotional intelligence. People who are most sociable also have approximately a 30 to 50% lower risk of cognitive decline over a period of time. So your environment, including the people in it, are extremely important, as your brain naturally adapts to whatever is around it. That factor alone is extremely important to keep in mind. Now, the final method is dieting, and specifically using the same principle that the rest of the list has been around. Omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, support BDNF through an enzyme called TPA, which converts inactive pro-BDNF into its usable, mature form. Research on those specific pathways found that omega-3 intake upregulates that enzyme specifically, and separate research found that low omega-3 status correlated with significantly worse attention scores. You've probably heard on the internet of intermittent fasting before. So the benefits from that is actually true, especially for intelligence. Animal research on fasting and BDNF is quite strong. Although the case for humans aren't as strong, there are still benefits it is confirmed to have. One of the best foods that you can have to improve intelligence is fatty fish. And if you've ever heard of fish oil supplements on TikTok or Instagram, you've probably understand what I'm talking about right now. So those specific compounds and just having a good diet overall, which is, avoiding processed foods, avoiding too much sodium, all those things, although they are generally good for your life, they do support intelligence and increasing your abilities cognitively. So to put it all together, remember that just doing a single one of these things won't dramatically increase your IQ. Sleep might be the closest thing you can do for that, but all these methods require commitment over time. Do these consistently for 2 to 3 years, and you'll see the limitations on your IQ start to be loosened and eventually dissipated. And you can expect an increase of overall score from 15 to 30 points. The PowerIQ server is in the description, and if you enjoyed the video, make sure to stick around soon, as we'll be covering the entire category of reasoning next. Thank you.